Hello, my name is Colin and you're watching Plod with Me TV. And today we are going to take a wander around parts of London and tell you about the history, and today's area is Covent Garden. So I'm starting here, well, I'll just spin round. Starting here opposite Covent Garden station, and I'll just literally walk across Longacre to come to this building first. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to tilt up and I'll show you this blue sign. So on this blue sign it says Lionel Lucan, Royal Coach Builder and inventor of the lifeboat, lived and worked on this site between 1767 and 1824. Now, why am I showing you that? Well, basically because the important bit there is, it says Royal Coach Builder. Hold on, I'll spin you around. Longacre here was where you would have come in the 17 and 1800s if you had a horse and carriage set up and you needed some repairs done or some maintenance done on your carriage. This is where you would have come. And Longacre had many of these establishments, and indeed as the horse and carriage disappeared and the advent of the horse's carriage, and always known as the car, started taking over, the big workshops, which would have had to be able to hold big carriages and the horses and everything else, they were big units. They were then able to turn into car showrooms. And if I just spin around and show you Longacre, by 1906, well, that's a Longacre here. By 1906, there were 41 showrooms related to the motor industry, or at least the transport industry. Might have been still some doing the horse and carriage bit, but obviously they were on the way out. But in terms of motors and the new fangled technology, there was 41 establishments. So I just thought I would show you that. The other thing I was going to show you is this lady. So you can see above those two signs, the bottom one of which just relates to the fact that there was once a place called the Queen's Theatre here. Apparently in the late, when was that? Let me see. 1870, 1867 to 70. It's only lasted 11 years. So, but the thing I was interested in was the sculpture of that lady. So if you can see her there, and that is representative of the Mercer's Guild. Now, down, spin around. So, if you remember right, if any of you watched my video up by St. Paul's, the very first video I did, we talked about the various guilds, and we visited the goldsmiths guild and the salters and the brewers and all the rest of it. So the guilds were basically the organisations that managed the various trades in London. And they're all based up in the city, the headquarters, or at least they were, and to date there is now 110 of them, and they're ordered in order of precedence of the most importance. That symbol there of that lady is for the Mercer's Guild, and they were number one. In the 110 guilds, they were number one. And the reason that that symbol is here is because it denotes that they own this building. In fact, they own this land. I think everything going back down towards the bottom of Neil Street there, all the way down to St. Martin's Lane, they own. And they use the money that they raise from the various rents and leases to give money to charity. In fact, they donate in the last 10 years, I think they've done about 15 million pounds to various charitable good causes. I think that's per year. Check their website, you can see for yourself. But they basically do a lot of good works in the area for the underprivileged. They've started some academies for sort of educational academies for young people. Do lots of good stuff, and it's all based on the profits that they make from these buildings. I'm guessing they might have got this land from the Earl of Bedford possibly about 100 years ago, because the Earl of Bedford owned all this land, including Covent Garden, from the 1540s, when Henry VIII gave them a charter to it, and held on to it until the early 20th century. So I'm guessing that maybe when the Mercers got a hold of it. But a lot of these guilds, they would have had land bequeathed to them over the years. I remember reading, it might have been the goldsmiths I'm thinking of, but I remember reading about one person who left his guild a couple of 100 acres of land in the, I think it was the 15 or 1600s, in a place that was out in the middle of nowhere. And it was called Ealing. And Ealing is now very sort of well-established part of West London. So you can imagine 400 or 500 years ago it was all fields, somebody lives on the land, now it's worth a lot of money. But like I say, a lot of these places, they use the money that they make for charitable reasons. Now, I'm just going to walk down Longacre for a bit, because what we're going to do is we're going to weave in and out around Covent Garden and tell you about some of the places and some of the people who have lived around it. And eventually we will actually get to Covent Garden itself. I thought, first of all, while we're here, and since I mentioned all that stuff to do with the motor industry, I thought I would show you a little symbol of it that a lot of people probably pass without realising. So if you're ever down this way, no, we're not interested in Gap, but if we scroll up, there we go. I don't know if you can see that well. The writing at the very top says Carriage Manufactory. So obviously this was where carriages must have been made, no doubt maintained, back in the day. But there it goes, just went past the modern equipment. And I just thought I would show you that. Now we're going to wander on down Longacre. And if you're wondering why it's so quiet in Covent Garden, it's a good question. That's because it's very early on a Sunday morning. That will also be why my hands are freezing. So, oh yeah, hold on. I remember walking past this a little while ago. Just further proof of the ownership of the Mercer's company. There's these nice houses. And as I say, you can walk past, if you're wandering down the main streets of Covent Garden, you don't even know where these places are here. But for example, there's another example of that sculpture. Maidstone House, 1909. There's another one there, it says Tunbridge House, same year. There's one here, it says Jepson House. So, as I say, all owned by the Mercer Company, or the Guild. And Mercers basically dealt with, I suppose you'd call everyday goods. Lots to do with cloth and stuff. But when I think of them, I always think of, always had in my head the old westerns and stuff, mercantile goods, the sort of stuff that people needed day to day to get by. So I think it might be where the sort of either the word mercantile or possibly the word Mercers sort of come from each other, if you see what I mean. Right. So we're going to continue down Longacre and then hope that the little alleyway that I'm wanting to use is open for the day. Hasn't been closed off for construction or whatever else. It's looking a little bit like a built up scaffolding. Here we go. is Conduit Court. Oh, so we've just entered a Stanley Kubrick movie, isn't it? There we go. See? Little place where you can sit and have your coffee in the quiet away from the hustle and bustle. I'm going to come around this way. Go down this little alley. And this alley is at the side of a pub called the Lamb and Flag. And actually, the alley itself has a bit of history. I'm sure there used to be a sign, maybe it's further down. The alley itself has a bit of history before the pub was even here. So, basically, the year 1679, in this alley, there was a famous poet at the time. More than a poet, he was a bit of a wit. A guy called, why are we going way around? A guy called John Dryden, whose works I have never read, but he was. I get the feeling from having read about him and other peers commenting about him. You get the feeling he's maybe a bit like a forerunner of Oscar Wilde, a bit of a funny bugger. He was a poet, but he would also write satirical pieces. It turns out he, in that alley, in 1679, he got a terrible beating from two men. This is back in the days when a good kicking could have resulted in his death. And it was believed that it was because he wrote a satirical piece about the Earl of Rochester, who was also a good friend of the king, and one or both of them didn't take too kindly of it. So the jury's out as to who organised his giving a beating, whether it was Rochester himself, but some people suggest it might have been King Charles II himself, because he was a friend of Rochester's. But that is where it happened in 1679, and as I say, sort of the pub, certainly as it is now, wasn't then. Oh yeah, there is a sort of an old-fashioned sign just underneath that lamp I tilt up. Little round sign above the Union Jacks. It says, on the 19th of December 1679, in the alley by the Lamb and Flag, the poet John Dryden was nearly done to death by a rope hard by the Earl of Rochester. There you go. Now, it says on the bar, circa 1623. To be honest, the only bits left of the bar of 1623 would be probably part of the wooden framework within. This brickwork was all done in 1958, so it's all quite recent. If I can sort of take a step back, and this is a very popular pub for tourists and for some of the locals who would drink in it. It was called the Cooper's Arms. I believe they've got sort of details of an established pub from about 1672. Onwards, and it was called 1732, sorry, get my dates mixed up. It was called the Cooper's Arms until about the 1800s, and I think the mid-1800s, when it then became the Lamb and Flag. But in the early 1800s, there used to be a bare-knuckle prize fight take place, I believe, upstairs. And at that time, it was known locally, not by its proper name, the Cooper's Arms, but as the Bucket of Blood. Purely because of the boxing association. So, like I say, it became a Lamb and Flag later in the 1800s. I think it was around 1864, but don't quote me. There we go. So, that is the Lamb and Flag, and I've been in. It's a nice pub. In fact, it reminds me of, there's a very touristy pub in Belfast called The Crown, which has lots of little snugs, and which I used to partake of and spend time in every Friday when I was doing my A-levels. And that pub has little snugs in it, and the first time I walked in I just thought, oh, it's a bit like a crown. So that's why I do quite like it. Probably feels like a bit of a nostalgia for me. Now, we're just going to wander down here to this very sort of grey building. And you would have thought with the money they've got, they would have done it up a bit, but maybe they don't feel the need. Okay, so here is the Garrick Club. Now the Garrick Club, and indeed this street is called Garrick Street, is named after a famous actor, 1700s, called David Garrick. And this particular establishment is what they call the Gentleman's Club. And hang on, I'll scroll up and tilt up so you can see all of it. There we go. The Gentleman's Club. Now the thing is, most Gentleman's Clubs traditionally are down around the St James area, and they would be mostly for like the aristocracy and the filthy rich, all the rest of it, but very much the aristocracy, politicians, that sort of thing. And the actors, it would seem, in the late 1700s and 1800s, basically thought that they should have a place where they could meet up. So where, people, as they said, of refinement and education could meet up and, converse, that sort of thing. And so they founded this club. Now, it was originally around the corner on King Street, but it moved here in, I think it was 1834, and it's been here ever since. And the reason I say, I don't know if you can see, but there's some very fine portraits on the walls in there. The reason I say they could, afford to do it up a bit and clean it up a bit is because one of its members was A.A. Milne, the writer of Winnie the Pooh. And when he died, in his will, he left the rights to Winnie the Pooh to the Garrick Club. And in 1988, Walt Disney paid them $50 million for the privilege to have the rights. And so you would think that properly invested has kept the club going a very good way. Now, about a year and a half ago, I remember reading a little article, might have been less than that actually, one of its members had been booted out for having the temerity to suggest that maybe they should, that women be members. Of course, I'm not sure if anybody questioned if any women wanted to be members, but they basically suggested that maybe this would be a good thing. And he was promptly ejected from the club, lost his membership. But then last year, and now we're now 2025, but late last year in 2024, they held a vote, and they did agree to have women members. So obviously, whoever it was that suggested that, or sort of started the ball rolling, got their way. Don't know if they got their membership back though. But old-fashioned values coming around to the 21st century. But like I say, I'm not sure if anybody's actually asked if women want to be members. Having said that, I think I just saw a waitress walk through the building there, so obviously I don't mind having female waiters. Okay. At least she's dressed like a waitress. I don't know if you can see those paintings, but they're very grand, old-fashioned portraits all over the walls in there, which I've never seen before because a lot of times the curtains are closed.
Just scheme that, just in support.
So, as I said, we're going to be wandering around the edges of Covent Garden, sort of weaving in and out around the side streets, and talking about some of the people. So we're going to go up here in this junction, and we're going to turn left, which will take us up towards Covent Garden, and we'll skirt around the edge of it. This street we're coming up to, we're going to turn into, it's called King Street, which was named after King Charles I, because he was the person who gave the Earl of Bedford the rights to actually develop Covent Garden. So up here there is a sign. Maybe it's a bit further up. Yeah. Oh, yep, next house up, my mistake. Okay, so let's talk about this building. So this is currently a bank, as you can see. That wasn't always the case. So, this was, until 1980, this was the headquarters of the British Communist Society, I suppose. Organisation, party, whatever. Back in the early 20s, there were some events that took place here that made the local police look a bit like the Keystone Cops. Now you got to remember, early 1920s, communism hadn't been that long since they had started a revolution in Russia and taken Russia over, and that sparked a bit of panic all around Europe. France, Germany, lots of places, including here, were very, very nervy about the communists and about them sort of trying to get the workers to rise up and overthrow the government. So they were obviously all very, nervous about it. So as I say, this was the headquarters. So a couple of events that took place here. 1925, the police do a raid. And they go in and they find a lot of stuff, which they then took, I suppose, to court. They found about 250,000 documents. They took a statue and a very suspicious metal ball, which it turned out to be part of the ball cock system for flushing the toilet. But obviously it was very suspicious when they took it. So that was the first raid, which didn't make them look too good. But having learned from that, they then sort of developed their style a bit, the local police, and a bunch of detectives were set up in the building next door. And because there was a hall in here where the communists would give speeches, the detectives next door basically dug their way through a wall, the connecting wall, and emerged underneath the stage so that they could sit and take notes on what was being said. Unfortunately for them, at one of the meetings, somebody noticed that there was people underneath the stage and called for the police, who promptly arrived and arrested their own detectives, obviously not realising that this operation was in place. So, as I say, a bit Keystone Cops. Fast forward to, I think it was the 1960s or 70s, MI5 had a go, and they were successful, because what they did was, hold on, I'm just trying to scroll around. What they did relates to this. Oh, hold on, down the way. Manhole cover. See that manhole cover? Well, basically, MI5 sent some agents over, and it was the guy that wrote the big expose. Can't remember, is it Peter Wright? Did the big expose in the 1980s. The book got banned here in Britain, but was sold all around the rest of the world. Became a bit of a joke, but he did a big expose all about the ongoing stuff that MI5 got up to, and this was one of the operations. So basically, they had a duplicate manhole cover, and about half a dozen of them came along here one night, pretending to be drunk, and they then basically pretended that one of them had sort of fallen down, being ill, whatever, while the rest of them stood around them laughing and giggling. Replaced the manhole cover with one which had a listening device in it, and then made their way. And apparently it was very successful in terms of getting information. So I don't know what was underneath there that they managed to get. That was that particular secret operation. Not quite James Bond, but I suppose that's the reality of it. Now, the next place I wanted to show you was this house. There's a blue plaque there, just to the left of the light, and it says Thomas Orne, 1710 to 1778, composer, lived here. Now, Thomas Orne, as it says, was a composer. In fact, he went on to be one of the biggest composers of his age, British ones anyway, for like the various theatres, not musicals, but the theatres and that sort of thing. And he wrote one of Britain's most famous tunes. Very popular. Once a year, people go absolutely mental with it at the last night of the proms, because he wrote Road Britannia. And he had a bit of a, unusual start into the music business, because his family lived here. They were upholsterers, and they had high hopes of him becoming a solicitor, because that was, the next generation was trying to do a bit better than the previous one. His dad wanted him to be a solicitor, and he did actually spend some time studying for it, but his heart was in music. So much so that he smuggled into his bedroom, or maybe his dad just didn't notice, a thing called a spinet, which is a bit like a harpsichord. And at night, when his parents were in bed, he would put handkerchiefs across the strings of the spinet so that would muffle the sound, and he would practice playing it. And he would then sneak out and visit local theatres. He actually dressed up as one of the livery men, the sort of people who would maybe be serving in the theatres, just so that he could get in and observe and sort of see the musicians at work. And then he eventually became one of them, and then he started his own sort of band's not the word, but you know what I mean, public quartet, something like that. And his father actually saw him doing this by accident, and that's how he found out about his musical aspirations. And then a local, very famous musician took him under his wing and persuaded his father to let him give it a go.
I can't do it, honestly.
I'll just say he went on to do
I'll see you later.
very well for himself. Now, so we're going to go up here. As I say, this is King Street. We're just about to hit the corner, the sort of northwest corner of Covent Garden. And have a quick look at this place. This is the oldest house in Covent Garden at the minute. Look at dates from about 1743, thereabouts. And that green plaque tells us this is what once housed the National Sporting Club, and that was until 1929. And the National Sporting Club was responsible for setting up the organisation of boxing. So any of you that are into your boxing, and certainly in terms of British setup, this is where it was all organised and set up from. And then here lived and died Admiral Edward Russell, Earl of Bedford, 1653 to 1727. So then, as I say, 1843 or 1743, there was a guy, I think it was Thomas Archer, who lived there. He was one of the last lords to leave. Now, quick word about the development of the area. So, Covent Garden is now one of the jewels of London. Something like over 40 million visitors a year come to the place. But originally, this was the first in several ways. First of all, it was the first square in London, for this Piazza thing, a square. And originally, it was just like a grass field. So it was almost like bringing the country to the rich people. The second thing was, the Earl of Bedford and his family had gotten the land from Henry VIII. There was a couple of sort of grants issued, one in 1540 something, and then another one in 1552, sort of confirming it. And then over time, he would lease out part of the land around the edge, along the Long Acre where we walked, and then down St Martin's Lane and down Drury Lane, because that was the outer edge. And he would lease that out, and all the bit in the centre was all grass. And to the south, down there, which is now buildings, was his big house. And when we're talking big, for any of you that know London and Somerset House, it was that sort of place. So he had his home there. There was a big wall at the back of his home. Then there was this pasture land. But one of his descendants, I think it was the fourth Earl, in the 1630s, he had an idea, which was one of the first instances of sort of property development as capitalism. He had an idea of how to make money by targeting a certain demographic. And he managed to sort of get the sort of permission for it to start building on the land, because for well over 150, 200 years, the kings, Elizabeth, Henry, that sort of thing, had banned building outside the main city of London because they were worried about people in plague times getting it or catching it outside and then bringing it into the city. But by the 1600s, he had this idea of, as I say, developing, and from the very start, it was aimed at rich people. So him and Charles I basically was the person he had to get the lease from, and the main instigator of it was that the church. The minister from St Martin's in the Fields had written to the Earl saying, look, there's any chance you could use that big green patch you've got, to build a church, because we've got way more people coming in here than we can handle, and another church would be handy. So he used that as a way of going to Charles I and saying, look, I want to build on this land. But then what he did decide to do was to build a whole group. There goes the glass recycling. A whole group of houses aimed specifically at the rich. And that was, from day one, that was the plan, because he wanted to make money from this. So as I say, it was our early days of property capitalism. The first 22 houses that were built, 17 of them had a title, so an earl, a baron, a knighthood, whatever. And the leaseholds basically didn't let you sublet them. If you rented the house, you had to take the whole house and you couldn't then sublet it. So it was aimed at the rich from day one and excluded everybody else. The other thing about it was, even in the days before cars, I remember talking about the horse traffic, the design of the streets. So like it comes up here and then it would stop. There's a street there, it would stop. There's a street at that end, it would stop, and there's a one down here at the bottom. The whole design was to stop a through flow of traffic. It was designed so that you came here and this is where you were. You weren't making your way to somewhere else. It was all about exclusivity. So these days, rich people would have gated communities, but this was the next best thing. You sort of design the place in such a way that there wasn't much in the way of traffic coming through, and then the rich people had the use of the place. And this, I will put in some pictures of some artist paintings from the time. This was a green pasture land that the rich people could enjoy, and as I say, it was almost an example of the country being brought to the rich, but it was very exclusive. So that was that. Now over here, which is now the Apple offices, or Apple shop, I should say. Oh, I should mention that building, which is now the orange one, which is now owned by some YouTube influencer, I believe. There was a nightclub a rock club in the mid-1960s called Middle Earth, and used to get people going in there. Everybody remember Arthur Brown, the crazy world of Arthur Brown. But also one of the people apparently used to finish jamming at night. One of the last shows would be a certain Mark Bolan before he made it big. A young David Bowie would be in there. He was in the early days of his fame. He used to experiment with his artistic side, doing the mime and all that sort of stuff. And apparently I saw a documentary where a lady who used to go there said it was the sort of place you'd go in the Friday night and emerge on a Monday morning. No doubt somewhat worse than there. And along this bit, in the 70s, was a place called the Rock Garden, which I vaguely remember. I don't know why. I think I visited here when I was a kid in the 70s. But the Rock Garden, and it was a music venue, and it had sort of a lot of people had their first here. It was the first place that Talking Heads played in when they came to England. It was where Dire Straits and the Police and the Stranglers and whatnot played. And for any of you into the Smiths, this was their first gig outside of, or in London. I think possibly outside of Manchester, but definitely in London. Now, at the corner here, at the same time as Lord Archer was living in that house, on this corner was a guy called John Hunter. And there was a museum, in fact there's several museums to him and his brother, one in London, one in Glasgow. But they lived in this corner bit, but if the houses went right back up to where the Covent Garden station is, and just show you and get an idea of the depth of the houses. And at the top end of this one, certainly as far as that street, see the Nag's Head, pubs there on the White Line on the left, and the Nag's Head. You see the depth of the houses, they were quite deep. But on this one, at the back end, if you were into your medicine and your science, you could visit an anatomy school, because John Hunter was one of the leading sort of figures, and his brother William, leading figures in terms of anatomy and the study of it. So that used to be here. Well, I wasn't going to wander in the Covent Garden yet, but it's empty, so let's take advantage of it. We're going to go round to the right. Let's walk through outside, get the set up. It's not often you get to sit it like this, it's usually absolutely thronged people. Where you get to see the other side of London when you're wandering around one of the richest parts, and there's the homeless people taking shelter underneath the eaves of St Paul's. Now, I'll just have a look at where's the best way to stand. So, this is St Paul's Church, otherwise known as the Actors' Church, and this is the church that the Earl of Bedford ended up building. The story goes that apparently whenever the church had written to him, and he was having negotiations with George I, and he had got this plan for building all these houses, and the church was going to be part of it, but I'm sure it wasn't at the forefront of his mind. And he came wandering out of his establishment one day down under the Springfield to find the king and his planner, Gogh Jones, working along with big plans, which had the idea for the Piazza and had the idea for the church. And obviously, as I was saying earlier, this was a money spinner for him. He wasn't doing it for the greater good of the community. He was looking to make money from it. And whenever the king had gone and established that they wanted it to be for, they wanted a church added onto the plans as one of the main bits, not as an afterthought. It would seem that the Earl of Bedford took Gogh Jones to one side and said, when it comes to this church, I'm not looking at anything fancy, not too expensive, no more than a barn. And Jones replied, well, in that case, I'll build you the finest barn in England. And so that was what St Paul's Church, that was the origins of that. I'll spin around. It burnt down in 1795, but it was rebuilt to the exact same specifications. And with those, if I sort of tilt up a bit, I don't know if you can see how well you can see it, but the sort of wooden sort of slats underneath the triangle a bit there, it almost has a bit of a barn look to it in parts. You've got the big stone pillars which are very flush, but the bits above it, are quite sort of basic. Now, it was here in the 1660s that the London Diarist spoke about seeing his first Punch and Judy show. And it was at this spot. So this is obviously these days is a big popular spot with the performers. If you come here to visit Covent Garden, you'll always see buskers of various sorts here. Normally sort of street performers and musicians tend to go towards the other end. This end is more for people doing circus acts and that sort of stuff. So it's always been doing this. Like Sandwell Pepys was saying stuff like that in the 1660s. That's what's that, 350 years ago? It's been that way ever since. So that was where you saw the Punch and Judy show, and that's why this pub, if you look up the sign there, Covent Garden Market, Punch and Judy. That's a pub called the Punch and Judy, reminiscent of the fact that that's where the first Punch and Judy show took place. So, got that. It was here in Pygmalion, or later to be My Fair Lady, that George Bernard Shaw set his Henry Higgins meeting little Liza Doolittle, the flower seller here, and this is where he had her meet her. Now, let's see, we are after. Okay, so that place, come up to Henrietta Street, and we'll have a quick word about number 4 here. This on here, this is number 4, doesn't have any signs on it, but we know from the story that back in 1922 there was a young man, this was an RAF recruiting office, and there was a young man who paced up and down here for a couple of hours, very nervously, couldn't decide whether to go in or not. It was virtually sort of, losing the plot, and sort of ended up, he built up the nerve, and he went in to get recruited. Now the recruiting officer basically thought to himself, I've seen this guy's face somewhere before, and he was going through the sheets of known criminals and all the rest of it, couldn't place him, and in the end he basically said, I'm sorry, but you're just not the caliber of the sort of bloke that we need, so thanks but no thanks, and sent him packing. Unfortunately for him, a couple of hours later, the man came back, who called himself John Hume Ross, was a pseudonym. He arrived back with a messenger from the Air Ministry, and the message from the Air Ministry was, enlist this man straight away, or take your bowler hat and you'll be out the door, because this is Lawrence of Arabia. And what it was Lawrence had wanted to sort of rejoin the forces, but sort of anonymously. He was tired of all the fame and all the rest of it, and he just wanted to rejoin anonymously, hence the pseudonym. Probably also hence why the guy thought that he knew him, he'd seen his picture somewhere. So he did eventually get back in. So I'll go on down Henrietta Street. Now, we're going to look at this building, the pink one. Above it is a green plaque, and it says Jane Austen, 1775 to 1817. Novelist, stayed here 1813 to 1814. So for any of you Jane Austen fans, she spent some time here. And the reason she spent time here was because this was a bank, and her brother was the manager. And she used to come down and stay with them here, very close to the very exclusive, well, by this stage, it's more the Sex Street than Covent Garden, but the 1700s. But yeah, she used to come and stay with them, and she described it as being sort of very, very noisy, very dirty, very confusing with the noise and whatnot, but had a lot of promise. So that was where she stayed, and she was staying with her brother. I had to take in, I thought we were being a Sunday morning, I thought we might not be able to get into the church because it might be busy, but I thought I could at least show you the grounds. But it would seem it's not open on a Sunday. Maybe it's not open till the evening. It says there's a Eucharist at 7:30. So maybe it's not open until later in the day, and I'm just being too enthusiastic. I've got some pictures. I'll drop some pictures in. It was basically, I'm not sure if I've got pictures of the inside. I'll have a look. But basically, St. Paul's, known as the Actors' Church, because a lot of there's a lot of memorial services have taken place for actors in there. And obviously we're not far from Theatreland. And when you go into the church, the walls are covered in memorial plaques to various famous actors. Everything from Vivian Lee to, I've no doubt Olivia's in there. Certainly Boris Karloff or William Henry Pratt, he was known, he's in there. I have to say that's my favourite because he scared the hell out of me as a kid with Frankenstein. But, lots of British actors and actresses, Richard Pryor and sort of Hattie Gates and all that sort of stuff. There's just lots of different people. TV and movies. They'll have had services held in there and have memorial plaques. And even all the benches out in the grounds are dedicated to various people. One of which is to John Thaw. There's by the Inspector Morse Society, there's a plaque dedicated to him. There's another entrance up here. You might not be able to get into the grounds, but you might at least be able to see them a bit better. Okay, I'll show you the grounds. The church might not be open, but I'll show you the grounds. I have to say, that's a first. I've never seen a car drive up into it before, but there you go, first for everything. I'll just show you a couple of the benches. This is the grounds of the church. There we go. In loving memory of David Lee Lyons, dancer, choreographer and actor. William McLean, musician. So a lot of these I won't have heard of. Bob Reed, 1940 to 2005, much loved magician. In memory of the Brink family of Drury Lane. And there you go, sometimes they're not even actors. This one says, in loving memory of Claire Hope, librarian at RADA for 27 years. So that's the Royal Association of Dramatic Arts. In loving memory of Shirley and Dick Griffin, otherwise known as Dickie and the Duchess. Well, as I say, lots of plaques to lots of people. No doubt some of them, not necessarily well known to if you're on the end of your TV and movies, sort of theatre people, that sort of thing. There we go. In loving memory of Avril Angers, actress, comedian, April 18th, 1918 to 2005, awarded the African Star. Mies and Lee eloped to London from Amsterdam. So, all sorts. As I say, there is the church itself from the outside. And I'll see if I've got some pictures from the inside. Trouble is, I've got literally thousands of pictures of different things in London, but I haven't really organised them too well. It could take me ages sorting through trying to find. I'll have to take some time out and do it at some point. It's not that critical. Aye. Now, it's handy that we come to opposite number 25 because that's the next stop. And this is going to be our last one on this tour, at least part one. So, number 25, no idea what it is now. But if you've been here in the late 1800s, this was an art dealership called Googh. And a certain famous person who would go on to be a famous Dutch artist in his own right, used to work here as part of the dealership, and his name was Vincent van Gogh. Now, they used to have an office at the south of Covent Garden, but then they moved here. But apparently Vincent worked in the dealership, I think his brother had managed to get him a job. They were mainly a European thing, but they had a branch here in London. And apparently after a while they basically found him too grumpy and obviously didn't get on with people, and he was transferred back over to Europe. But he spent some time living in London. He tried doing teaching at a school, did all sorts, but this was part of his time here as well. But later, I think around 1895, there was a East End tailor called Moses, and he brought his operation up here and started it. And in 1897, I believe it was, somebody came to him and said, I can't afford the bath suit, but maybe, could I sort of rent it out for, a day here and a day there as and when I need it. And that started a whole business in its own right, which became known as Moss Bros. He changed the name, anglicised it, and Moss Bros or Moss Brothers, but it was always, everybody used to just call it Moss Bros. And at one stage, he basically owned about half this block. It was just all Moss Bros, but this is where it all sort of started, the renting out of clothes in that way. It became a very fashionable thing and built a huge business out of it. So, we're in Bedford Street, and I think, given the time, I think that will do us for today. So, as ever, I hope you enjoyed it. If so, leave a comment below. But otherwise, thanks for watching. If you want to watch more of these videos, you can hit the subscribe button. It should be appearing anytime now. And I'll hopefully see you in part 2. Thanks very much.